that's okay with everybody. And a very warm welcome to this workshop, workshop number 125. Here we are looking at balancing acts in terms of encryption, privacy, and public safety. My name is David Wright. I'm Director of the UK Safe Internet Centre and CEO of a UK charity, SWGFL. And I'm delighted to be able to introduce you to the panel that we have today, both here and online as well. This is obviously the last workshop of this IGF, and it's a real pleasure to be able to close out this IGF ahead of the closing ceremony with this particular subject. So we are going to be looking at this complex balance between encryption, privacy rights, and public safety, and the needs for structured multi-stakeholder discussion. We have an hour with you, so we are going to have to keep comments, questions, perhaps brief, but it is such an important subject that we see. I'm just first of all going to introduce the panel to you, and for the panelists, I'm going to have to probably just condense some of the bios just because of time, but and I'm going to run through them in terms of the sequence of questions as well. So I'd like to welcome Andrew Campling, who's here with us. So Andrew is Director of 419 Consulting, a public policy and public affairs consultancy focused on the tech and telecom sectors. He has over a decade of non-exec experience, backed by nearly 40 years of experience in a wide range of increasingly senior roles in a mainly business-to-business technology context. He's been engaging in initiatives linked to encrypted DNS, encrypted SNI, and related developments in internet standards, primarily to understand their impact in real-world deployments. It's worthwhile pointing out, so Andrew is a trustee of the Internet Watch Foundation, which is a global charity, one of our partners within the UK Safe Internet Centre, and holds an MSc in Strategic Marketing Management and an MBA. Andrew is currently studying in his spare time, studying law, and plans to complete his LLM in the next couple of years. Online joining us is Arnaud Taddy. If we might be able to bring up, please, Arnaud onto the screen. Arnaud is a global security strategist at Symantec by Broadcom. He's an executive advisor of security strategy and transformation for the top 150 Symantec customers. As part of his mission, Arnaud participates in specific standardization defining organizations, and in particular, and this warrants congratulations, Arnaud, elected chair of the ITU SG17 representing the UK and works at the IETF. Started his career in 1993 at the famous CERN IT division in Geneva, which created the World Wide Web, and where he led the team responsible for communication, authentication, and authorization. In 2000, joined Sun and became one of the 100 elected global principal engineers. In 2007, he joined Symantec and hold chief architect roles up to director of research as direct report to Dr. Hugh Thompson, Symantec CTO, and actual RSA conference chairman. I'd then also like to move on to the next panelist, which we can also bring Honey onto the screen, please. Honey Makola is the manager of the Policy Research and Development Unit at the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, where she guides the regulator in navigating its evolving roles across various aspects of ICT developments, including cybersecurity. She also serves as a vice chairperson of the ITUT Study Group 17, which focuses on setting international standards for cybersecurity. Within Study Group 17, Honey co-convenes the Correspondence Group on Child Online Protection, working to identify gaps in technical measures and promote initiatives that create safer online environments for children. If I can now draw back into the room, if I can introduce Afnan. Afnan Alromi is an accomplished cybersecurity leader with over 12 years of experience in managing complex projects and shaping cybersecurity strategies. As Vice Chairman of the ITUT Study Group 17 Cybersecurity and Director of the Cybersecurity Operations Centre at CST, she plays a key role in advancing cybersecurity resilience locally and globally. Afnan holds advanced degrees in software engineering and computer science, along with several industry professional certifications, and is known for her expertise in strategic planning, vulnerability management, and fostering international collaborations. Afnan, welcome. Finally, if I can welcome my colleague Boris. Boris Vodanovic is an expert in the field of online safety and currently serves as the head of engagements at the and partnerships at SWGFL, the UK-based charity. Like me, he also works with the UK Safe Internet Centre, which is part of the European InSafe network. His work involves educating and raising awareness about online safety for children, parents, teachers, and other stakeholders across the world. Boris has worked extensively with various European countries, including Croatia, where he worked at the Safe Internet Centre, and he's been involved in numerous missions to countries like Belarus, Serbia, Montenegro, North Macedonia to present online safety strategies to government officials and NGOs. His focus is on protecting children from online threats, such as cyberbullying, child sexual exploitation and scams, as well as empowering professionals through workshops and keynote speeches. So I would just like to welcome the panel, and also this afternoon, forgive me, I'm joined by my colleague Niels here, who's going to moderate the online conversations for when we get through to chats. If I can just invite the panelists just to give a quick opening couple of sentences. Andrew, if we can start with you, please.
Good afternoon, everyone, and also hello to everyone online. As David said, my name is Andrew Campling. I'm a trustee of the Internet Watch Foundation, amongst other things. I think this is an incredibly important issue, which we'll get into in a moment. And I think, although we've sort of focused on the sort of trade-offs and specifically talk about privacy, as I'll expand on it in a short while, I really want to get into the debate about privacy versus other human rights, because I think we overinflate the importance of privacy and completely ignore often all of the other human rights, including fundamental rights, as opposed to privacy as a qualified right. But that's something we'll come on to when David asks us questions, I'm sure.
Thank you, Andrew. Arno, if I can throw it to you, please.
Yes. Can you hear me correctly? Yes.
Yes, we can. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you for the chance to be in this workshop. Yeah, this is the topic is really heartbreaking when you start to understand what is at stake. It's both concerning to see the level of harm that is increasing, perhaps accelerating. And at the same time, we are facing a real design issue, and we need to make trade-offs that are really difficult for a number of humans. So observing this from ITU and SG17 is an interesting journey, and hopefully we are maturing and putting ourselves into conditions where we can have a meaningful discussion. Thank you.
Arno, thank you. If I can now just turn to Honey.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to draw attention a little bit to the work that I do as the convener of the correspondence group, where we are focusing on identifying and addressing gaps in child online protection standardization within the study group 17. We have done a lot of work in reviewing the regulations, the standards that are currently in place. And, the work has progressed well, and we are on our way in identifying the gaps. But I would also like to take this opportunity, please, to invite the people in the group as well as online to please join the correspondence group on child online protection. This can be done through subscription on my workspace. But for the purpose of today's meeting, for me, I think encryption is a very important and powerful tool that can help us safeguard communications and information. But it also creates significant challenges in protecting children online. So for the purpose of today's meeting, I just want us to try and find a balance between privacy on the other hand and other issues such as the protection of children online. It's a challenging balance, but one I believe that it is essential for the effectiveness of child online protection. And I look forward to the engagements this afternoon. Thank you.
Honey, thank you very much. Now turning back to the room, Afnan, if I can hold it to you, please.
Good afternoon, everyone, and looking forward to this wonderful discussion today and engaging in this topic, and looking forward to discuss the challenges that my colleague Honey just discussed that are to be discussed today, and also see how we can succeed with balancing the encryption and privacy rights and at the same time public safety. So looking forward for this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Afnan. And finally, Boris, if you can introduce.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation and ability to contribute, especially from a diverse set of points looking at this. And I love the title. It says Encryption, Privacy, and Public Safety. And I think that is the framework of conversation that I think we should all have and support. And one of the questions in my mind that we can later hopefully answer is, how do we create meaningful and impactful discussions on these topics that takes into account a wide array of different perspective, needs, and abilities and representation, but equally respecting the direction that we all want to take to a better and safer world, which includes protections of children in itself. So really proud to be here.
Thank you, Boris. Okay, so moving on to the particular questions that we're going to pose, and then panelists will share and discuss with everybody, after which point we will then open the floor and the virtual floor to questions. So please do hold on to questions. There will be a time. I am, because of timing as well, I'm going to keep panelists for perhaps 4 minutes. So please keep contributions succinct. So Andrew, I'm going to turn to you without any further ado first, and I wonder if you could elaborate a little on how should governments and tech companies approach the creation of lawful access mechanisms without infringing on privacy rights? Straight into this point.
Fantastic. Thank you, David, for the question, and to provoke hopefully a response from some of the people, the participants in the room and online. In my view, the weaponization of privacy is being used and has been and is continuing to be used to override all of the human rights of children and other vulnerable groups, and I think that's a fundamental problem. As I said earlier, remembering that privacy is a qualified right, and we need to think about all of the human rights. And also, again, to provoke a response, encryption, let's remember, is not the same as security. They're fundamentally different things, but they're often conflated. And for example, if you begin, as is happening increasingly in the Internet Standards world, to encrypt indicators of compromise and metadata, you end up with weakened security. And if you weaken security, you have no privacy, but you think you have, and that's also a big problem. So very briefly, let's put a scale to the problem, and I'm going to focus on child sex abuse because that's what the Internet Watch Foundation does. We're seeing roughly 150 million victims of child sexual violence every year around the world, and we actually are recording in the order of 100 million reports of CSAM images and videos every year, and that's roughly 3 new images being found every second, new images or videos. So even in the course of this workshop, that's a scary number of images and videos being found. The internet has magnified the scale of the problem of CSAM significantly. It happened pre-internet, but the ability to publish and share the images globally means, and remembering every time an image is shared, that's a crime and there's a victim. The scale of the problem is huge compared to what it was pre-internet. We know from research that end-to-end encrypted messaging platforms are widely used to find and share CSAM, and there's a very large sample size behind that research. But to get directly to the problem, in terms of things like lawful encryption, interception, you don't need to backdoor encryption to help solve this problem. Client-side scanning would for known CSAM images would immediately reduce the size of the problem. It doesn't break encryption, it doesn't break privacy, so that's an easy way to make an impact, as would be the use of tools like age estimation and age verification to keep adults off of platforms intended for children and children off of platforms intended for adults, to try and keep the victims away from the criminals. So those will be my sort of suggestions, places to start, and hopefully that will provoke a response from people in a few minutes. Thank you.
I'm pretty sure it will do, Andrew. Thank you. Just can I ask a follow-up question, just to prime the microphone again? Are developments in internet standards helping or harming human rights?
So in my view, the increased use and requirement to use encryption in some of those standards, I could give examples, but probably that's too much detail for here, is making the problem worse, not better. It's making it harder to find where the crimes are happening, and it's making it easier for the criminals to hide. So some of the developments are actually problematic in the standards bodies, an area where I'm active, and they also coincidentally weaken security as well. So I think that's why we need civil society to engage in places like the standards bodies. Currently, it's mainly technologists making these decisions, and we need, dare I say it, multi-stakeholder engagement to actually shine a light on things that are causing huge societal problems.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to move on now to Arno, if I can, please, onto the screen. So Arno, the question that we would pose to you, so what technical innovations or solutions do you see as viable for achieving a balance between privacy and public safety?
I like the mission impossible. It's a very difficult problem. So in one hand, one of the issues is that we have only one model for internet as we know it today, and so anything we do is going to impact various communities. So far so good. Until some versions of TLS and other considerations, we sort of managed to keep the community together, and everybody could find what it needed from the setup. But for various reasons, some directions were set, and for good, bad, and ugly reasons. It's not a judgment. It's just that they were set in a certain direction, and now it is pushing the solution for one specific part of the spectrum of the humans. So that means that now we have situations where some are going to get benefits, and some are going to have a problem with what is happening. So this is very difficult to move from there because we have only one design and it's difficult to get out of this thing. So now that doesn't mean we cannot be creative. For other areas, we started to realize that maybe the problem is the fact that we have in the background of that the anthropological assumption that was made behind was one model for all the humans. That means a very narrow model for all the humans to make sure it fits the maximum. But when you do that, you lose the fact that there are subcontexts that have very specific needs. Child land protection is one subcontext. Education is one another subcontext. I would add elderly people is another subcontext. And all these subcontexts have different requirements and needs, and when we have to take a step back and make better, let's say, when we have to make design choices, the issue of a design is always the trade-offs. Which trade-offs are you going to do for a specific set of use cases and requirements. That's what the engineer we think. So when you go in this approach, perhaps the direction we could consider is subcontext. So it's not related here to channel protection, but I see, for example, subcontexts are maybe already happening. I discovered the advent of what we call enterprise browsers that allow specific requirements for enterprise use cases. Equally, you see more and more family solutions by some hyperscalers. So the question I have is the premise of the solution not to consider that we should perhaps re-highlight the concept of subcontext, and from there we could start to envision perhaps some technical solutions. I will stop at that. Thank you.
Anna, thank you. Thank you very much for trying to take on Mission Impossible. Okay, moving swiftly on to Honey, which we can't see you at the moment, Honey. But if I can, there we go. If I can pose you the question, so how can international collaboration improve or complicate the encryption debate, especially when balancing privacy with cross-border safety issues?
Thank you for the question. So I have a lot of experience in international collaboration, and also having recently chaired the cybersecurity resolutions at the WTSA 2024. I want to draw a little bit on that experience, right? So, and I would like to start with what complicates the debates in the collaboration. First of all, the participants come to the collaboration table, if I may, with different legal and regulatory frameworks. They could be divided into the ones that are pro data protection and privacy. Then you get the ones that are for government control, for national security purposes. Then you get the ones that want balance. So those differences make it very difficult to agree on a unified approach to encryption across borders. So you can even imagine for the frustration for the companies operating across borders regarding encryption. Then there's also the imbalance in cybersecurity capabilities across the different nations. You get nations with advanced cybersecurity capabilities that may argue for stronger encryption to protect the critical infrastructure, which is fair. And then on the other hand, for example, at the moment, a priority for Africa could be the protection of children online versus individual privacy. And that is understandable because currently Africa has the highest dividend when it comes to young people. So you would understand why, from their perspective, protecting the children online now is actually protecting their future economy and protecting everything. And then you get the MOUs and the multilateral treaties and so forth. But from the readings, it could be said that this can be quite slow and cumbersome when issues need to be dealt with right away and governments are seeking swift access. And then there's the geopolitical tension and distrust as well, and that we witness. And from my work with the ITU so far, there's also a question of how do you develop global standards that are balanced in addressing the needs of the different regions, taking into account the imbalances in technical capabilities, the skills that different countries are having, and the level of skills actually, and the culture of privacy in itself. But the complications are just the negatives. Moving to the how it can improve, taking into account, obviously, having the what complicates it in the background. I think the starting point in the encryption debate is that there are two sides, but how do we develop common ground? So that is what the international collaboration can improve. It has the ability to facilitate dialogue between nations with the differing stands on encryption. And moving from that established common ground, countries can then establish harmonized legal and technical standards. There will be compromises to be made by different groups, but remembering or recalling the common ground is important for facilitating the debate. And I personally believe, and from my experience, that it's during this international dialogues where innovative solutions can be birthed. For example, if you cannot compromise, what do? You look for solutions. And that can be in the form of research into privacy-preserving technologies, which is what the work of the CG-COP, Correspondence Group on Child Online Protection of the ITU Study Group 17 is doing. You know, we're looking for the solution that balances the two, public-private partnerships, development, the work that is done by the ITU development sector in sharing information and also capacity building. But the most important thing to also remember in all of this improvement that can be brought about by international collaboration, it requires active participation and contribution from the private sector as well, not just government and regulators. So what makes the collaboration work is everybody finding that common ground first and then starting to move on there and see how they can compromise.
Honey, thank you very much, and I very much share the hope that we will find solutions at events like this, despite it, as Arnaud was saying, being mission impossible. Okay, I'm next going to back to the room and to Afnan. So, Afnan, if I can pose to you from your perspective, what are the most critical challenges in balancing encryption with public safety and privacy rights?
Thank you, David. First of all, before I go into answering your question, I would like to thank my colleagues here in this panel discussion for their great insights and the points they've brought in. They've actually pointed out to a couple of challenges that I was hoping and planning to discuss in this talk. Although, as we say, encryption is an important tool and aspect that helps us to secure and our sensitive data and to have it more safe, although it poses a couple of challenges. And in today's session, although we have a little time, I'm going to discuss just a couple that are most likely those with us and the attendees are more familiar with. The first challenge that we can sense and see is when it comes to global inconsistency, and I think Arnold and Honey mentioned a couple of points on that aspect, and also the conflicting international laws, where it brings it more challenging to discuss this. For example, countries having varied legal standards and laws and regulations, and when we see international companies working in those different countries, they have to comply with each standards and they have to fulfill all those standards as well. So this brings a hard challenge in that aspect. Another challenge is when it comes to the evolving technologies, and we've discussed this as well in SG17, and we have like a specific question to emerging and evolving technologies in that aspect. Evolving technologies and the rapid pace of technology advancements means that we have to keep up with them and we have to address those encryption standards that bring in. And one of the evolving technologies that we are considering or discussing in SG17 is quantum computing. And quantum computing in the future will most likely break some of the encryption standards that we have today. And this poses a challenge that we need to consider or start the transition to secure quantum infrastructure. Another challenge, and it's very important, and we have a couple of initiatives in Saudi Arabia that is looking into that aspect, which is the challenges of protecting against abuse online. And as we see, some of the tools or the applications that we have today, or even chatting applications that we use in a day-to-day life, they have a lot of encryption, or they have encryption implemented to secure our communication. And although this is vital and important, however, it it creates a challenge for law enforcement to help secure or have public safety more safe in the environment, and most importantly, children, where we cannot see what type of text that is being communicated and the abuse that could happen in that discussion. So these are just like some of the challenges that we need to consider when we balance between encryption and also public safety and privacy rights as well. So I think this is just something that we need to consider, and the only way to reach a collaboration is to have feedback either from both from different areas, either from the government, from the private sector, from civils, and all parties that could collaborate in that discussion and try to find a way to balance to reach a balance in that aspect. So thank you.
Thank you very much. That's the ensuing conversation afterward, which I'm going to encourage everybody to think about questions. Then when we open the floor, it does appear we've got some questions online too. So I say that just before I throw it over finally to my colleague Boris. And so my question here, Boris, is what role should the public play in this discourse, and how can awareness be effectively raised on the impact of encryption policies on privacy and security?
Thank you. Short answer, education. But how to do it properly is a much longer discussion. And I think we should start with defining frameworks for meaningful discussions that allow us a communication goals and structure that allow exactly these kinds of discussions on a multiple levels of representation, diversity, and abilities and disabilities that could contribute to these conversations that I might not be able to do now. But on a broader point, I think we should all be aware that vision can only pull as hard as reality can follow. And the current reality that in these chairs around us is not 150 million children across the world being sexually abused every year, and that number is rising. That is the reality we need to face. And while the vision we can all agree is magnificent, the reality is something that we need to take into account. And thinking about the discussions, I'm going to raise more questions than answers here, but I think this is the perfect space, is how do we make sure that we do not allow dominance and dominant discussions or part of this discussion to be a part from a certain area, agenda, stakeholder, or interest? And how do we have a meaningful level playing field for anybody contributing to this discussion? How do we make sure that we developed initially technological solutions that take into the account of the benefit of the user or the benefit of the child first and foremost, and then we continue developing those solutions? And I think all of that builds up into what I personally consider our principal duty as adults to create a better and a safer world for people and young children following in our footsteps. And I'll come back to our nod and say, I love the movie Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible or not, but I don't know if you remember that in each of those movies, a great team of people working towards their own abilities and capabilities, working together, make the movie in the end Mission Quite Possible. I know that doesn't make a good marketing title, but I think that should be a good notion. And just to come on what Honey said, which I think is important, what we are trying to do is not easy, but we have to ask ourselves, what is easy and what is right? And lean, I would suggest, on the side what is right and finding solutions for that. To just come back on that point for my final, we need to be able and find a way to develop global standards with local sensitivities that respect many of the things that I mentioned. And I wholeheartedly ask all of you today listening us online and here, do ask us questions. Let's have a discussion on so many levels, on so many representations that we all need to understand. But if we can all take into account that all of us, at one point, I don't know if you remember, were a child, and we all needed somebody to stand up for us and defend what is the benefit of us. So I ask you today to look through that prism while we're discussing this topic. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that includes the contributions from the panelists to set the scene as well for everybody. I am going to ask if there's somebody behind me puts their hand up. Can you just kind of can you help me out? I haven't got eyes in the back of my head. I do also like as well this theme of Mission Possible. or mission impossible, Arno, depending on which one. Perhaps we should be reaching out to the producers or Tom Cruise to ask to find us a way through here. I open the floor to any particular questions, if anyone has. I can see behind me. Yes. Okay. If I can ask, if you could just introduce yourselves, that would be helpful to start with too. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for giving me the floor. My name is Cynthia Lisufi. I come from South Africa, and I work with most of the panelists in this session at the ITU, and it's quite refreshing to listen to the diverse views of different stakeholders on this important topic, which is quite dear to South Africa, but not only South Africa, but many of the countries that participate in the ITU work, and specifically in the study group 17, which is the technical study group of the ITU when it comes to issues of standard and security. For me, specifically as South Africa, we believe that actually we stand a good chance. And why we are saying this is because we are looking at the upcoming Westers Plus 20 review process, where we are also bringing in the issue of the Global Digital Compact. And we believe that some of these issues we can, as I would say, a community of stakeholders that are concerned with this particular issue, we find ways, because what I'm actually picking up here today is that we are all concerned. But as we've said, the issue is how do we deal with this? So, and I'm also hearing that we need this continuous discussion. And for us to continue with this, we also need to take advantage of all the processes that are currently happening to make sure that this issue is not pushed at the back of other priorities, because different stakeholders will fight for their priorities. So all I'm pleading for all the stakeholders in this room, let us take advantage of the processes that are happening, and we make sure that the issue of the child online protection also takes the forefront in all of these decisions, especially at the UN level. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. What we'll do is we'll take, I think, three questions, and then we'll come to the panel. So thank you.
Thank you. My name is Catherine Bielek. I'm an infectious disease physician at Harvard Medical School, and not to add another layer of complexity to this, but I certainly wonder if public health and pandemic response might balance this a little bit as well. So there are some lessons I think that we can pull from how we navigated the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of data privacy, security, and public health and safety. There's perhaps a little bit simplified, but when we did contact tracing for the COVID-19 pandemic, people can give up their own right, their qualified right to privacy. They can volunteer that information. And then certainly how much is surveilled, it does not necessarily dictate how much data is kept, how it's kept, and where it's kept. I think that is important too for other pandemics or syndemics, which are overlapping pandemics, especially as related to HIV, which is my area, can carry a lot of stigma or criminalization laws. So when that information is kept, there is surveillance related to that. But in the United States, that's kept in a secure, encrypted facility at a state health department, for instance. And the amount that you surveil is not necessarily proportional to the amount that you keep. So my question perhaps is related to how these lessons might apply to this discussion in other areas as well.
Online, I'm seeing a lot of interaction, a lot of compliment for the speakers as well. I've got a question here from Cheryl. Does balancing necessarily mean we need to rank rights and risks to properly weigh them against each other? If not, how do we begin an objective comprehensive review? If so, how do we do this on a global level? There was another question, which basically comes up to, like, can somebody please clear the air? Because there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of discussion where there's also a lot of fake news in there. For example, when we are talking about privacy versus child protection, how can we, is it true that if we want to go towards child protection, that we are giving up on privacy? I think there's a lot of questions there to solve that one.
Niels, thank you. Okay, so those three questions addressed to the panel. I'm going to go to Andrew first.
So let me have a go at two of those, but briefly. Firstly, on the weakening of encryption question, I would argue, and I'll be as precise as I can without hopefully getting too detailed, that specifically to detect known child sex abuse material, that needs to have no impact whatsoever on encryption. Again, expand that ever so slightly, if in the end-to-end messaging applications, if they agreed to scan any images before they were uploaded to see if they contained known CSAM and then encrypt, there are no privacy implications to that, because you don't learn what the image is, you simply learn that it isn't known CSAM by something called hash matching. Matching, for those of you that have knowledge in that area. You don't need to look at the content of the message either. So you're simply saying, does this image in a mathematical sense match a database of known CSAM? So that doesn't, in my opinion, have any privacy implications unless there's a match. And if there's a match, then you've committed a crime and your qualified right to privacy is surrendered anyway. So that's fine. And then just briefly, the other point on the sort of, I think the question was ranking or trading off different rights. Yes. And I would always say that if you have to trade rights, you ought to bias towards the most vulnerable in society. And at the moment, in my opinion, the weaponization of privacy is largely benefiting privileged adults at the expense of lots of different vulnerable groups. And that is an unacceptable trade-off. So if we have to make trade-offs, we should bias the vulnerable or advantage the vulnerable, not the privileged. That's the wrong way round, in my view.
Andrew, thank you very much. Arno, if I can just bring you in here.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to Boris about Mission Impossible or Mission Possible. I like it, but I had to be provocative, of course. No, I think it's to come back on the issue. It's a real design problem in the sense of theory of design, right? And I really like the previous intervention. I could not capture the name of the person who made the analogy with the COVID-19 learnings. That's exactly what we should do. We should learn from others and other areas where they have resolved the problem. Because sometimes there is a lot of hype about issues of, and this is not private, and the data are not secure, and people are losing their rights, and so on. There are areas where, no. The problem of why the Mission Impossible is because of something else. The problem that is underlying behind the scene is the fact that very few people realize that security cannot be proven. At the low level, altitude level on encryption, yes, you can perhaps prove mathematically some cryptography and other things. But the moment you elevate the altitude, you lose the possibility to prove that your system is secure. And if you ask anybody about, is whatever control I put is secure, can I trust it? The answer is fundamentally no. You cannot. And that's the problem of who guards the guards behind the scene. And there is no way, or I could not find a way, that we can resolve the problem. In fact, it's not even the problem. The problem is not that this is impossible per se. The problem is that few people missed that point. So when security discussed with privacy, it's an unequal battle because security has little to offer to the privacy side. So we are turning into circle with some people trying to split us for dogmatic reasons versus let's recognize things how they are and let's be pragmatic and let's recognize the design problem. But if we get it back to a design problem, we would then include back the ethics, the anthropology, the experience, the law. We could do something about it. That's where the mission becomes possible. So one approach of breaking the problem in pieces, of getting a sub-context, could, back to the question, should we have different weights between people? Of course not. That would be terrible. If we end up in a place where we have to put priorities of some humans versus some others, I don't think that we have done the job. It has to be equal. All humans should be respected in this story. So if we could take a step back, understand perhaps from others, I really like the example of the COVID-19, and regroup all the possibilities with a strategy of perhaps divide to conquer so that we can split the technical design and open the options. So I believe the risk of doing this is more a problem of it's going to impact significantly the way that we have built and developed our entire internet at the moment, from the browsers to the CDNs to the servers to all things, because now we would need to represent a richer human. I think the problem is that today the underlying problem is that the human model behind this whole design is very, very, very narrow. And we are locked. We can't do anything because if we help one now, we lose properties for the other one. So what if we would re-enrich the model behind the scene? How many possibilities we would create? That would be something I could propose.
Arnaud, thank you very much. Boris?
Thank you. I'll try my best to cover it all in a short. And thank you so much for the questions. And I'll come to the first one, and Cynthia, and bringing child online protection to the highest levels. I full-heartedly support you and Bennett as the 17, and if I can do anything as well to support more, to keep this, and this is one of the places to do, absolutely, yes. I love the idea of using COVID learnings, especially about volunteering rights and seeing how that works in a different space and impacts. I think as well with Arnaud, I would be interested to see how that works. And on the question of how do we balance that risk in the global, I think that is the challenge. That is the biggest challenge that we have to do. But I have to agree with Arnaud, we cannot have conflicting things and have to decide one from the other, which brings me to the point that I want to make, with no disrespect to the person asking that question. We should utterly reject the framework of conversation of having privacy versus security. And if we reject it, I'll just remind everybody that most of us flew to this wonderful country. And what if 90% of our flights had a 90% of a chance to land in Ankara, maybe in Zagreb, maybe in London? None of us would take that option or those odds. So let's reject the framework of conversation of privacy versus security and focus on the title, and that is privacy and security. There are solutions. There are ways we can achieve that. They might be difficult. They might be hard. And I'll come back. What is easy and what is right? And I think we should, to answer the question of the online speaker, absolutely detest and reject the notion that that is the discussion we're having. None of us want to go back on our privacy, but none of us as well want to see the thing that as well are not mentioned, that we cannot fully trust that any system is secure. But what I can tell you that we know and have referenced and have research and evidence that they are currently unintended consequences. They are doing harm to the often unheard, unseen, and unsupported people and young children across the world. So I go back and ask the question, what is right and what is easy? And let's start doing the right thing, even though, and I still hope, Arnaud, we will find the mission quite possible in the end, and maybe laugh at this in one day, but I am worried about quantum computing and making this whole discussion basically pointless. But yes.
I feel that's an entirely different workshop. Okay. Afnan, do you want to go first? I know I'll come to you next.
Thank you. I'll make it very short. I just want to thank the floor for bringing those great questions. And just to come back to the pandemic and the COVID, I think one aspect that from the lesson learned brought up from this is having public awareness. I think this is big part of it, that you have a right, and it's part of the online safety that you should be granted to have, since the pandemic made us all become most of our time remote. So I think part of the lesson learned here is awareness of the public community and what is right for them and what they can subscribe or work to. So this is just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Afnan. Arnaud?
Yes, very quick to come back on something I need to perhaps requalify a bit. When I point to the fact that we cannot trust security, and let's say I totally agree with you, boy. It's exactly where I want us to go. We need to stop this debate about privacy versus security. And the fact is that at the moment security cannot be trusted, and we have nothing to offer to privacy. I see it as an opportunity. Now, to come back on the person that took the analogy with health, this is exactly the same thing. We forget that in the real world, your immune system has defects. You will miss a virus, you will you will have an autoimmune disease. Can I trust my security by design? No. And that's why we created the health system. But can I trust the health system? Absolutely not either. If the surgeon makes a mistake, I die. If I take too many medicine, I die. And so point is that it is a paradox. But I would like people to consider it as a positive paradox, that if we would precisely heal our security and privacy people together, let's do something about it. And then we can reestablish perhaps a new approach that could be fruitful for not differentiating, let's say, not prioritizing humans versus each other. On the contrary, having the right design for each of our different contexts, and they can evolve over time from when people are children up to when they are elderly. That's it. Thank you.
Arnaud, thank you very much. Honey?
Yes, thank you. And I just want to echo what my colleagues were saying about the very purpose of this workshop, right? We are here to find balance. So it's not necessarily weighing one against the other. But the last part of the question asking how do we begin an objective, comprehensive review, and how do we do that on a global scale? In my opinion, there is a need for a global body responsible for the global framework. And at the moment, we have at regional level, the African Telecommunication Union, and internationally, and other regional bodies. But internationally, we have the International Telecommunication Union. And I think those international bodies then have a responsibility to ensure that they become neutral conveners of the differing stakeholders with their differing viewpoints, so that there can be an unrestricted dialogue regarding finding the balance in the solution. Because ignoring any of the views, whether extreme or on the extreme side or on the other, without a really looking at the matter and really discussing the situation, can oversimplify the issue of encryption, and that's not what we want. So I think that to answer the question, bodies and such as the international regulatory bodies are very important in creating that space for that dialogue.
Okay, thank you very much. So, and hopefully, in terms of those questions posed, there was suitable and adequate responses to there. We have just a little over 5 minutes left. Are there any other questions that anybody has? Any more questions online? Okay, I'm going to perhaps then this question could be one to close us with, given just a few minutes left, and it's one about public awareness. Public understanding of encryption is often limited. I think we've kind of heard about that. How can stakeholders better educate citizens, everybody, about the impacts of encryption on privacy and public safety? Who wants to take that?
I'll try it short. Again, it's about the same word I use is education, but more so to the fact is adaptable education, because different levels and different capabilities of people need to understand this topic from a different way. I think somebody much smarter than me said, if you cannot explain your topic in 5 minutes to a 5-year-old, you might not be an expert in the topic. We need to find sensitive local environments to expand on the topics that are way too complex for the smartest people in the world. That either means that we don't understand the field well enough, or don't we have the right people to expand that. Yes, awareness campaigns. Yes, stakeholders who genuinely take effort of educating the people in the right way without the agenda leaning left or right is important. Having a body that can assess that and tell us who is doing it better or worse and kind of being inspired about it. We have been doing decades of awareness raising from child sexual abuse, for intimate image abuse, for work of child online protection in general. SWGFL, let alone, is 25 years old next year. So we know the principles that can build that and do that. But all of those principles fall on education. And sometimes it took us a decade to educate a whole nation of the importance. Why do we need to do one thing or another? It will take us time. So the short answer is to educate the general public and raise their awareness. We need right people in the right place educating them and allow for some time to pass so we can do that on a global scale or a much larger scale. I hope, does that answer the question enough?
That's a good go, Boris. Andrew?
Yeah, so I think I would start by being less ambitious. And dare I say, repeating a point I made earlier, where a lot of the decisions about encryption are made are not here. They're in some of the standards development organizations, such as the IGF, the one I'm active in, the Internet Engineering Task Force, which makes design choices about the underlying internet standards. What I think we actually need to do is to get people from the groups that are here, at least some of them, to engage over there. So civil society groups, governments, regulators, others who have got sufficient technical knowledge to engage in the standards bodies need to attend and pay attention to what is happening there and the implications for some of the decisions being taken. Because otherwise, I think what we risk is developing internet standards which create societal problems, not because the people behind the standards are bad or evil, but because they don't have the necessary knowledge. So dare I say it, and it's probably appropriate to finish on the point here, multi-stakeholder approach, that is the way forward. And then obviously through our different communities, we can then spread the message backwards into the others that we engage with. But I'd like to get at least introduce some element of the multi-stakeholder approach into the technical bodies first and then work backwards.
Just before you put the microphone down there, Andrew, so can you give us an example about one of those underlying technology changes that may well have an impact, and how would that, what would that look like, just in case, assuming that not everybody has a technical understanding about, so a real life case example.
Okay, and again, I'll keep this hopefully at a high level. So some of the current changes that are being made in the underlying standards, something called encrypted client hello, for example, will make it increasingly difficult for parental controls to work. So for those of you that rely on parental controls to stop your children being able to access adult type content, or indeed in schools, similarly use the same sort of controls, potentially those systems will stop working, not because you've stopped using them, but because the underlying technology has changed. So that will be an example where, because there's not a multi-stakeholder discussion, it's being overlooked. So that's why we need that multi-stakeholder approach.
So I guess there's a point for everybody here, both in the room and online as well. That sounds a bit of a call to action too, that if you weren't aware of, or indeed if you have the opportunity to engage with the IETF and have, as Andrew said, that level of technical understanding, then please do. Please go and understand, how your browser and the internet is being designed in terms of some of those standards, and perhaps the unintended consequences that you may well see. Within why you're here, but those views, as has been widely said, I think, in terms of this multi-stakeholder approach, is a really important aspect. So there's a call to action for everybody about the IETF. So we have literally a couple of minutes left, and I am going to just have a look around if there are any particular closing remarks that anyone may well have amongst the panelists. I would go around, but we don't have time to do that. If anyone has any a concluding remark. Okay, thank you very much. So in 60 seconds, we clearly did cover a lot of subjects here, and I've got already pages of notes. I think so definitely Andrew, the term that was really opened the responses about the weaponization of the weaponization of privacy to override and impact children's safety was a bold statement to open. I think we very much heard as well that this is not a privacy against security. This is a privacy and security is one thing that I think we've come across as well. This does require multi-stakeholder. This is not one-dimensional, and it does require all of us to get involved so that the output is going to be reflective of that multi-stakeholder contribution as well. But I will finish with this is not mission impossible. Arno, Boris, this is mission possible. I think we've concluded with seeing the way through. So in that regard, Honey, we have found a particular solution at this particular workshop. So thank you very much, everybody, for those questions as well. It's a real pleasure to be able to moderate this panel of such amazing, esteemed and really world-leading experts here as well. So I would like you to join me in thanking them for their contribution just as we close out. Thank you very much.